All right, Dad. Today is Wednesday, July 17th. And how are you doing?
I'm doing fine. I'm fully recovered from the minor surgery last week
Yeah.
and feeling good.
Is there
It just
anything on
seems
your mind these days?
just the craziness of the world, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm trying a different tactic with the podcast. Keep it more open, see
Oh,
where it
that's really
goes.
open.
Well, something that's been on
Well,
my mind,
go ahead.
I've just noticed I listened to my our last episode and I was mortified about the number of times that I would say, you know, like, and now I'm trying my best to avoid doing that. It's a very annoying habit, and now that I was aware, and I'm aware of how often I said it, and I
Uh-huh.
am saying it, I'm trying to be conscious of not doing it. And then I listen to you speak, and you seem to avoid these filler words, like pretty
Oh,
well.
yeah, I,
You,
I'm guilty of the same thing.
I, well,
We all are to some extent. Even the best speakers sometimes do that. So anyway, yeah. Well, we can always improve.
yeah, well,
That's
how
one
is
of
it
the.
that you never
That's one of
practice speaking? Your best friend Chip is a hillbilly, and then your wife, my mother, is doesn't really speak English. You guys speak Chinese. I'm wondering how you sharpen your oratory skills.
Well, I guess talking to Doge.
Okay. Okay. Well, anyways,
Do-
well,
Doge, whose portrait I can see in the background.
this is a great dog. All right. Well, I'll try not to leave it too open because it seems like this very open concept of the podcast isn't going so well now. So, well,
Okay.
I'll direct you to something a bit more direct. So,
Yeah, I need questions. And sometimes I'm just bursting. There's something I really want to talk about. There are a number of things I would like to talk about, but I'm open to many different possibilities.
okay. Well, I think we should stick with the Trump assassination. The more I've been thinking about it, the
Right.
more I feel like something is fishy. That this is a conspiracy. Is that how you're feeling?
Okay. Uh, no. I
Okay, tell me why.
understand why. Okay. I'm going to. I said that in general, there are two explanations to an event like this, right? Incompetence or conspiracy. And my tendency is to go with incompetence unless you can prove otherwise. There's just a great deal of incompetence in the world. There's a great deal of incompetence in government agencies. And there clearly was incompetence on display on the day of the assassination attempt. Tremendous incompetence. The main thing is that outer perimeter had not been secured. And then, other people like Larry Johnson have pointed out, they clearly they didn't work out what you call an integrated communications protocol. I mean, here they were working. The Secret Service, okay, was working with local law enforcement agencies, and that happens. That's not unusual, at a venue like the one where Trump was. And apparently there was I think it was the local law enforcement that was supposed to be in charge of that building out there. Now, the Secret Service still is responsible for, inspecting it and, and establishing some sort of, is making sure it's secure. But, maybe the manpower that they use can be local law enforcement. And now you have these different agencies, right, that are got to be communicating with each other, especially when something goes wrong or something suspicious happens, as happened on that Saturday afternoon, right? But they apparently didn't have that. When they didn't have a someplace, like a single number or station that everybody was supposed to call into to report a problem. So there's a question, people saying, well, I told the cop and he didn't do anything. It's just that clearly they hadn't worked these things out and respond in advance. And then also you see somebody like, somebody with a gun on a roof, you got to know, okay, you don't want to just shoot him dead immediately because he could very well be, somebody in another agency. And that would, these things happen and there was a miscommunication. He's up there, but you should have something to mark him. Like he should have an armband of a certain color that was determined like the morning of the event, right? Clearly they didn't do that. So just overall, it was a mess. And the thing is, you can see that, okay, yeah, this was breathtaking incompetence. But then you start to wonder about what this agency, the Secret Service, has become. When you start to hear the head of the Secret Service, a woman that used to be an executive at Frito-Lay, like the corn chip company. She's the person that is running it now. And she clearly doesn't know what she's doing or talking about. She offered an explanation today, said, well, the reason we didn't have somebody up on the roof there was a safety concern. It was a peaked roof. You could have fallen down, right?
It was not a very peaked roof at all.
No, it was not. You've been on much steeper roofs. I know you have been. And
right.
And then those guys that were, you could see up to, from the spectator's vantage point to the left of Trump, the snipers that took the shots at him, they were on a steeper roof than the perpetrator was on, the assassin was on, right? So that's just absurd. I have the feeling this is not just one incidence of incompetence. It seems like this has become an incompetent agency. Now,
how can you say that? I mean, do you have other examples of glaring incompetence? I mean, how do we know that this wasn't deliberate incompetence?
Okay, right. Well, I'll get to that. I don't think the conspiracy theory is ridiculous. Again, for reasons that we've said. But I'm going to just lay out the incompetence theory, which I find sufficient. Again, I do say it's breathtaking incompetence, but I still find it believable. So we had all these problems, and one reason maybe that we had these problems was that I guess Trump's usual team was pulled off. I've heard there's different, reasons for that. One was that Jill Biden was in Pittsburgh. Later, I didn't hear anything about that, so that may have been just a rumor. But then more recently, it was said that the team was tired, and they rotated in a new team, but this new team was rather inexperienced. So you had an inexperienced team that made a lot of bad decisions and maybe have been poorly trained because of problems higher up within the Secret Service. Now, you're not the only guy who thinks it's a conspiracy theory. Larry Johnson, a very smart guy, a former CIA analyst, he's leaning towards that too. But then when he laid out his reasons for it, I just did not find him convincing. And one thing that he pointed out, is convincing him that this had to be a setup and that it has to be a team, actually convinced me otherwise. And that is, he talked about the fact that the assassin, the would-be assassin, walked across the field a great distance, like 100 yards or more, a couple hundred yards in the open with his gun, right? He parked a van and then walked all the way over to the building, and nobody stopped him. But I mean, that tells me that, okay, if it's a conspiracy, this was a really wild, incompetent conspiracy, or you have to claim that somehow everybody's involved, local law enforcement and the Secret Service. Because
not necessarily, right?
Well, because the thing is, he went by, all kinds of people saw him.
That makes it even more apparent, though. Like, they noticed him, I was reading, 20 to 30 minutes before he actually fired off any shots.
Right.
So that people notified. So even if, they should have just taken Trump, even if they weren't sure if he was a good guy or a bad guy. The immediate thing to do would be like, okay, well, let's cancel it and investigate. The fact that
well, that's what I've heard. That really would have been a professional response. Before taking a shot, you just say, Trump, you got to drop down. We're in danger right now. Right?
Yeah, or just escort him off and say, we got to check out this perp. We got somebody here with a gun that we're not sure if he's with a government agent or.
Yeah, right. No, I agree. Again, if it's incompetence, it's breathtaking incompetence, and that's just a further example of it. But I mean, it seems to me like if this was a conspiracy, like he's working with somehow the agencies, that this is just so it's so open, and again that you would have to have everybody in on it. It doesn't even strike me as something that had been worked out professionally, like somebody.
You don't have to have everybody in on it, though, right? I mean, it could. There's somebody that's going to call the shot, right? That says, we have somebody here, and somebody says, "Oh, just don't worry about it, let it go," right? Will we ever find out if somebody said that? Because surely I'm sure somebody was notified. Well, have you heard anything from local police?
Yeah, the thing is, it would be hard to see if, in fact, that's what. Yeah, we hope in the end we really need an investigation. Both of us are speculating, and I'm just, again, I'm somebody who is reluctant to embrace conspiracy theories, unless I find some overwhelming evidence. I see just overwhelming incompetence. I think everything here so far can be explained by it, and you just say, well, this is just so incompetent, it's impossible. I can understand that, and I can understand why somebody would.
This then. Do you think JFK was assassinated by the CIA?
I don't know. I really don't know.
You disappoint me, Dad.
Things. I haven't actually sat down and read a book, but I'm always hearing about different theories, and all I can say from what I know about that assassination that there's enough to be very suspicious that the Warren Commission's findings, were not. Were not sound. Like, maybe were at least in part a cover-up of some kind. But I haven't ever had, like an explanation of, of what actually took place that really I found convincing or believable. Now, maybe there's something out there. I know there's a wealth of material, and perhaps somebody has really put his finger on what happened that day. I just haven't seen it. That's all I can say.
Well, the roof where the shooter was on was 130 yards away. People say to secure the outer perimeter. In my opinion, that's not even an outer perimeter. 130 yards is nothing. I mean, think about, everybody knows a track and field track, right? That's 440 yards around that track. So just think about that. How short that is. Usain Bolt would be there in 10 seconds.
Yeah. Well, actually, typically you secure the perimeter going out 500 meters, sometimes even more. A professional sniper, can hit targets at, over a kilometer, over 1,000 meters. But they, usually the minimum radius, that for a secured area, for, again, a venue like this for a presidential candidate is 500 meters, at least. Yeah, 500
I could have taken Trump out with a slingshot at 130 yards. Maybe.
Maybe not.
Hey, there's some pretty good slingshots.
I know it's wild. I agree. And like this person, clearly, like the person in charge of the Secret Service and should be fired, and other people too. And this matter should be thoroughly investigated.
Do you believe that it will be thoroughly investigated?
Yeah. Well, there are reasons. I understand there are reasons to be skeptical about that. There's no question about it.
One thing that is consistent is that there's very little accountability in the U.S. government, at least within the past 20, 30 years. It seems like we reward failure. It's like, oh, you destroyed that country and blew $500 billion to $1 trillion. Let's promote them. Let's get them, fast track this guy to the top.
Right.
So,
I'm sure this was probably, I don't know. I don't know if this is for a fact, but this woman came from Frito-Lay. You kind of wonder, is she a DEI?
Those are good chips.
They may be great chips, but
well, hey, maybe they get. Okay, never mind.
Okay.
Yeah, to me, it just seems the level of incompetence would be so high that I don't find it believable. Like, how could it be that this guy was detected up to a half an hour before? It's not like there are a lot of buildings here. It's a pretty open farmland field. There's only that basically where the shooter was is the only the most logical spot.
I think there were other spots, but that would be the one you would be one of the most really focused on.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so it's like the prime spot, no question about it.
And okay, sure, there's incompetence. Maybe they didn't have enough training, but their Secret Service, their law enforcement, they have some training. Even if you didn't have any training, just from playing video games, I could tell you, what to do, and just like, hey. And then you have the fact that it's Trump, who's probably the most likely person to be assassinated in America, a high-profile person to be assassinated in America, maybe even the world, right? So it just doesn't add up to me. I'm sticking with
Well, you may be right. I'm not saying that you're wrong, but I'm going to stick with my. I'm sticking with my incompetence theory. Nobody knows, other than a select group of people. Nobody really knows anything now. We're on the outside speculating, but. I guess. Let's see. What else?
How could it be that officers were alerted half an hour before, and there was nothing was done to say, Trump, stay inside until we check this out.
Well, I'll actually repeat something that you said last time, which I thought was very insightful. It's just that look, nothing has happened like this for 43 years, and you think about all these various events. There have been hundreds, thousands and thousands and thousands, and the snipers get up in position and, everything, and nothing happens. You start to get that's your default assumption. Of course, I have this job where nothing happens, right? Mm. And then when something happens, you just kind of, maybe there are a couple times when something seemed weird and it turned out not to be anything.
But even then, it's like one out of 100 times or even 1,000 times, something happens. And that's exciting for you. Check it out, right? That's what you're supposed to do.
Right. Yeah, but it also just kind of reminds me of, like, I've read books by professional kind of, we would call them hackers now. This was back in the day of phone systems. He would learn how to hack into phone systems. And to do that, he had to actually call like personnel within the telephone company and, get codes and everything. And they were not supposed to give them to him. But it was like nobody, the fact is that, you get calls all the time. And sometimes people kind of like forget the protocol or whatever. And there's no problem. You don't want to be an a-hole and cause problems. So you just go along with it. And so he would just get the codes again and again. People would break protocol because it was so unusual. Nobody had ever done what he had done. That it was just like the security system that had been set up didn't really work because people just became so used to, uneventfulness, and that became everybody's expectation. And then, you act suspicious, which you're supposed to be. Then you kind of like, what's wrong with you, man? Why are you being so suspicious? And it may be some of that psychology that's in place. It's just like, hey, this doesn't seem right, but, I can't really be anything serious. It's got to be one of their guys. I know that's not an excuse. I'm not saying that, it's incompetence. They should have not worried about being, overly suspicious. It was their job to be suspicious. But sometimes that kind of psychology kicks in.
But you have to say that there's so many people that we know that the sniper that took him out had his crosshairs on him. That's why he took him out within seconds afterwards. You couldn't, when a shot rings out, you have to look around, try to find out where it's coming from if you don't know, and then get your sights on him. It doesn't happen right away. So he was clearly, the sniper was on him, watching him the whole time. So if you're sitting there watching this guy might be the assassin.
Right. Yeah.
If people are watching it, then surely there's somebody they're communicating with somebody. Somebody has made the call and say, don't take the shot.
Out. Yeah, again,
we're not going to find out if it's the FBI, right? There's no way they're going to.
Well, I wouldn't say no way, but again, I would be skeptical about it.
What was it? 51 secret, 51 security, high-level security agents signed off on the Hunter Biden laptop
thing,
saying that it was Russian disinformation. That's how far they go. They're so open to just.
Right. Yeah, it was totally false, and these guys knew it. But they signed off on it. I won't trust
these guys for anything.
Well, that's the fix that we're in. Like in a, back in 1960.
I know what you mean. It's So I don't trust them at all to do anything correctly.
Right. So
but at the same time,
never
I do
know
believe,
for sure.
Right, but I'm also in the camp that I believe that the government is incredibly incompetent. I don't think they're able to toast a Pop-Tart correctly.
Right.
So they're bad. They're incompetent and they're nefarious.
Yeah,
and
that's right. The question is, were they evil or were they just dumb?
But what I think it sounds like this was. I would go with it. Well, it's both. You're saying how this was such a poorly executed If it was
Well, yeah,
nefarious,
yes,
it's like,
that's
well,
fair
yeah, you're
enough.
just saying they're incompetent, and
Yeah, fair enough.
They're
Okay,
nefarious.
touche.
So,
You got me on
so
that.
I think, I don't know. I think there's something else at play here.
Well,
it
it
just
was
doesn't add up.
Charlie. And we know the answer. It just came out. It was the Iranians. Right.
I was going to bring that up. I couldn't believe it. So I was watching the RNC, the Republican National Convention, yesterday, and there was a breaking news report, and it said there is a Iranian assassination attempt, or the Iranians are backing some type of assassination attempt that's been foiled by the U.S. government on Trump. They said that it wasn't related to Thomas Crooks, but yes, the Iranians are out to assassinate Trump. And of course, they didn't provide any proof or evidence. They just said it and then went back to it. Like, what is this coming from? I hate this so much because I have friends that are smart friends, that I know
fall
very
for
well.
That stuff, right?
They when this happened, they said they're in a group chat. Everybody's going on, and one of my really smart friends, he's like, his money was on it was either China, Russia, or Iran. And I said, like, the probability of that, in my opinion, is close to zero. If it's could be any foreign nation, it's going to be the Ukrainians. But most likely, it's just someone with Trump derangement syndrome, which it seems like still seems to be the most likely case.
Right.
But
well, again, you just I mean, you could make an argument for Iran. They certainly have motive. The fact is that Trump assassinated their hero, Soleimani, and they would. In a way, they would be justified doing it. But that's just not the way Iran operates. Iran's actually very cautious. There's also the talk about, they're always described as wild madmen. But, they're very cautious. And they know that something like this, if they in fact did something like this, they would bring down the wrath of the U.S. Military on them. And they don't want that. They might... Who knows? They might even win the war eventually, but it would be devastating to Iran. It would be absolutely devastating, and they do not want it. So it's anybody who understands the way actually Iranian foreign policy has been conducted and how they've dealt with all kinds of provocations, such as the assassination of General Soleimani over the last years and decades, just knows this is not Iranian behavior. I think Ukraine would be more likely. I don't. And some people have said, like within Russia, and even I think a Ukrainian has said that's pointed the finger at them, because they do have a history of assassinating. And they just the other day,
Budanov, right?
Budanov, came out. I like the dark Budanov, who likes he conducts his interviews in the dark because he likes being in the dark. Just a genocidal maniac. He goes on and on about how he likes killing Russians. But he admitted that they had attempted to assassinate Putin, several times. Obviously they failed, but. So this is something they do, and they have assassinated many people, in Russia and in the former Ukrainian territories.
I want to take a second just to.
But I don't think it is them. I think it is a lone gunman. I'm still going with that until I see solid proof.
I want to take a second just to talk about Budanov's statement saying that they have tried to assassinate Putin, and it seems like it's still something that they're wanting to do. Just how crazy that is. That statement in itself should just put alarm bells in everybody's head and saying, we can't be supporting this. You can't be supporting countries that are open to assassinate heads of state, especially the head of state of the most powerful nuclear country in the world.
Right.
Like that
very,
Budanov
very
saying that is that's a threat to the whole world.
Right.
Because if you do succeed, okay, you killed Putin. What happens now? Right. What we do know that within the Russian government is that there's a lot of pressure because Putin is too rational and too slow in his movement. Most of the pressure too restrained. Yeah, most of the political pressure he has in Russia is to go be more aggressive and say like, hey, look what they did to killing these kids in Crimea or Belgorod. The blood is running hot in Russia right now.
Right.
And for valid reasons.
And in fact, we have,
thank God we have Putin to say, calm
Yeah.
down, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. So frankly, I mean, if they've been trying to assassinate him, then the Russians would be fully justified in trying to assassinate Zelensky. I imagine that Zelensky was probably not too happy about that statement, but I don't think they have any such intention.
Right. I mean, Zelensky isn't even really the official leader
Yeah.
of Ukraine anymore, right? I mean,
Yeah,
there's
well-
no elections. His term
But,
ended
yeah, but
months
he is
ago.
leader of Ukraine. I mean, but yeah, legally you can make an argument that he's not. I understand.
Yeah. All right. Where were we right before we went off on this tangent? We
Oh,
were talking
Iran.
about- Okay, right, Iran. What do you know anything about the basis of this claim that Iran is trying to?
No.
Is there-
Well,
I
typically they don't
couldn't
give
see
you anything. It's just right. It's just an unnamed source. You know, that's the way it is. And so
It pisses me
it's the
off
way
because I
that
know
the intelligence agencies just have a way of, they can feed when they want to generate a rumor or whatever. They feed it to certain well connected journalists, and that's what happened in this case.
it pisses
I
me off
think
because I
it may
know
just
my
be a way of just like diverting attention from the Secret Service at this time in this one particular assassination.
right.
But it also may be, guys, laying the ground for an attack on Iran. Again, there is this faction within the U.S. government that wants to do that, and it may be part of this faction that is trying to generate more hostility, raise the temperature vis-a-vis Iran, so that when this Lebanon war finally kicks off, they can extend it to Iran. That's what those people want to do.
Right. Yeah. Well, when's Netanyahu going to be here again?
I think maybe the idea is this. It's just they see that, okay, maybe after the assassination attempt, they said, okay, damn, we're going to have Trump. Well, we can use Trump to attack Iran. I mean, he already has a bee in his bonnet about Iran, and now if he takes office and believing that the Iranians wanted to assassinate him, he's just more likely to go along with the extreme anti-Iran crowd within the deep state.
Yeah, I was thinking that maybe it has something to do with the fact that Netanyahu's going to be in the U.S. Is it next week? Addressing Congress?
Let's see.
soon.
I think it is. Yeah, I think it is about a week from now. Right.
Right. So I don't know if it's potentially to kind of pump, lube things up for him, so that way he can try to push this Iran war or this war to Lebanon in.
Well, that would fit into the theory that it is part of generating anti-Iran hostility, sentiment within the U.S. population, and you time it, right after Trump's assassination attempt and right before the arrival of Netanyahu.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's crazy if you think about how we always say how Iran is the head of this sort of terrorism axis, that it's the head of the snake, and it's Iran is this monster and the enemy of America. And then if you can take a look, like, what has Iran ever done to the United States? Like, can you say anything that it's done?
Well, 1979. Okay, 1979. You can point to the
like
the
1,000
hostage
years
taking.
ago.
Okay, well, right.
Yeah.
Well, 44 years ago, or 45 years ago, rather.
Right.
I guess it ended actually like 1980 when Reagan assumed office. So, roughly 44 years ago. So that was something. But in the meantime, but people, first of all, need to understand that was in response to something that we had done. We had overthrown, the CIA overthrew their democratically elected government, President Mossadegh, I think it was, in the 1950s, 1956 approximately, and installed the Shah, right? So if there was a lot of anger against the U.S., it was justified. Okay, so they struck back. It's just like, all these wild-eyed fanatics or whatever. You stop, learn some history, please, people, and then make some attempt at empathy. Put yourself in in their shoes and think about it. Yeah, I probably would have responded the same way, right? And then since then, nothing, really nothing. I mean, there's always talk about Iranian terrorism. It's just the few incidents that are played up just when you on close examination vanish. There's just They're not the source of terrorism in the Middle East. The terrorism that that takes place in the Middle East and Europe and elsewhere, and when it was responsible for 9/11, is Wahhabi Sunni terrorism. It's not Shia terrorism. I mean, I think you'd
But
be
the
hard
Sunnis
pressed.
are our allies, so we can't.
Yeah,
we don't talk
right.
about
So
it,
that kind of made it hard, So we had to go after Bin Laden, but we continued to work with Al Qaeda, both in Yemen and in Syria. And of course, we worked with Bin Laden, before we were against him. So but we shouldn't talk about this because everything's black and white, and we're the good guys and they're the bad guys.
Okay, so 45 years since there was anything that the Iranians did to America.
Yeah.
That was in response to what CIA did in Iran. Can you
Right.
give me a really quick recap of, has the United States done anything to Iran?
Oh, yes.
Okay, can you give me a quick recap of, let's say, from then, bro, just the 1979, 1980 till now. What has the United States done to Iran? And Iran hasn't done anything back.
Right. Well, it's just over the last, especially 20, 25 years, we've been imposing sanctions on them and accusing them of trying to develop a nuclear bomb. Now, there just isn't any evidence for this. I think, like the best work on this was done by Gareth Porter, who wrote a whole book on it. Very, very carefully researched. But there's just nothing. There may have been a time when they were thinking about it, but they just chose not to do it. And, there was what they call the smoking laptop. It was just this laptop that miraculously appeared, and it's supposed to have blueprints of missiles and, nuclear devices on it. This is supposed to be proof that they had a nuclear program. But it seems clear that was a Mossad plant.
Yeah, I was about to say.
The thing, it's not just things, what Gareth Porter and other dissident journalists have said, or the Iranians themselves have said, but it was back in, I believe it was 2006, the George W. Bush administration was leaning towards an attack on Iran. They'd already attacked Iraq, and there were people, within the administration that were pushing hard for an attack on Iran. But then the CIA came out with their national intelligence assessment, and they said there's just no evidence that Iran is working to develop a nuclear weapon. And that just actually, George W. Bush in his own memoirs says that he's angry about it. He said, that just pulled the rug from under my feet. I was set to attack him, but it was just even our CIA, occasionally back then at least, occasionally spoke truth to power, and they did. And they say, hey, we really can't find anything, and they haven't found anything since. But we have continue to apply these sanctions to the point, where they became this really like the sanctions from hell that we applied on Russia, but much more damaging for a small country like Iran. Russia is this vast, almost like a whole continent with great resources. So I remember when I hearing about the sanctions, I say, hey, it might hurt. I expected it to actually hurt Russia, but in the end, it really didn't even do that. But they're obviously going to survive because Iran survived. And Iran has so much less in the way of natural resources and so forth. But this was, it's really impoverished Iran. Many, I don't know how many, but clearly hundreds, thousands of people have died in Iran because they weren't able to get, hospitals weren't able to acquire drugs
Medical supplies.
Medical supplies, equipment, and so forth. And you can even point to like the recent death of Raisi. He was flying an old U.S. copter, like they hung on to a lot of old equipment. And I think they're only now starting to replace them. And, and it was very difficult for them to get replacement parts. So there have been airplane accidents and, just people in general. So that, there's, I don't know how many, if you did a very careful research, you could kind of figure out what the excess deaths have been over the years. And I'm sure that it's in the tens of thousands. And in general, just people have been impoverished. And at the same time, there's been a campaign of assassinations, I think mostly carried out by Mossad, but Mossad and CIA proxies.
It's like the U.S. has no concept of blowback. That this idea that, hey, if you impoverish a whole nation, do this collective punishment on a country, assassinate their scientists and their political leaders, that they'll just be like, yeah, that's fine.
Right.
Go
well,
on
now
about
we love
it.
we'll overthrow our rulers and
Yeah.
you know, and
Start
ask the
waving
U.S.
American
to appoint.
flags.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Of course they're gonna. It's amazing actually how much. I think latent pro-Western sentiment still exists in Iran. I mean, it used to be very strong, and if we were smart, we would have played to it and been their friend, and they could have actually supported indirect, not by any direct intervention, because people just don't like foreign nations intervening within their own societies. But just by being friendly, we would have supported the pro-Western forces within that country. But we've dealt a decisive blow to those pro-Western forces, and a lot of those pro-Western forces are just not pro-Western anymore. It's very similar to what's happened in Russia.
I was about to say,
where you did
right.
see, there was a lot of pro-Western, very strong pro-Western sentiment. I mean, it was a minority, but it was especially common among the elite. Maybe it was at one time it was 25% of the country or something, but now it's down and well below 5%.
No,
You're talking
nobody
about
likes
2%.
it, right?
Yeah, and it's because of our own behavior. And then the idea is that we're supposed to bring about the downfall of Putin. What you did is you absolutely eliminated the support for the West within those countries.
Right. Yeah, it's so stupid. I feel like the United States is the only country that I can think of that has this idea of enemies. It's constantly talking about its enemies.
Right.
And we're in a position where we actually are the place where we actually are in the greatest position to not have enemies. We have
right.
two oceans on either side. We're dominant, so we don't have to. People aren't trying to attack us or do anything like this, but we keep on having this rhetoric, our enemies, China, Russia, Iran. It's like, well, China, I lived I've been in China for 10 years. I lived there 10 years. The Chinese people all loved America. Whenever I get in a taxi car, they'd say like, "Oh, I'm from the U.S." They start chatting to me, and they're like, "Oh yeah, I love America," and then movies and all these things. And there isn't this. China doesn't view us as an enemy, but now they are beginning to, because we're forcing them to, because we constantly keep on saying China's the enemy, and China's like, what?
And slapping sanctions on them too.
Right. It's like China's just like, I'm like, what are you doing? Like, we've been selling you all this stuff. We've been, buying bonds as well, supporting your economy. What has China done to piss piss America off? What? Because they sold too many cheap goods? Because they made too many, whatever it is. It's it's crazy. And just this
and
US...
I think in both cases, it's just by being a sovereign, independent country that doesn't bow down to, U.S. diktats.
Right, but you talk to people in America, so many Americans just think like, oh yeah, our enemies. Like, that's not a normal line of thinking and thought for most people in other countries. You don't think about, I have enemies. Especially, they're enemies that are not anywhere are in your life. They're like these manifestations from in our minds of what an enemy is. It's something that we can't see. It's a demon. It's like a Beowulf type of. I don't even know if that analogy works, but but you know what I mean. Just this monster, distant monster kind of thing. It's a weird, very damaging part of American psyche. This idea that we have these enemies and we have to protect our freedom, because if we don't keep on blowing people up in other worlds, somehow they're going to come and take our freedoms. They're going to knock down my door and be like, "Hey, stop being so free." I don't know. It's crazy.
Right.
I mean, even in college, I remember I had I think it was a geography class I had. And it was some kind of maybe political geography. It might have been geopolitics class. I forget what it was. But on the exam, one of the questions was, why do other nations in the Middle East hate us? It was something like that. Very already loaded and weird. I'm like, what? And the multiple choice question, I got it wrong, because the answer is they hate us because of our plurality. This was a college exam. This is what the professor told us, and I got this question wrong. It's like, these people hate us because of our plurality. Like, what does that even mean, to be exact? We got too many because they're so upset because we got black
many
and
different
brown
kinds of
people
people.
hanging out. You know,
Right.
it's like it's so absurd. But
Yeah.
but that's been ingrained into
Yeah.
our society, into our
Well,
education.
I guess that's a sophisticated, college explanation, like the flyover country explanation. The George W. Bush explanation was they hate us because of our freedom.
The elite intelligentsia. They're like, oh, it's our plurality,
Right.
You know,
Exactly.
yeah, it's hard to change this type of thinking within a country. I hope it's beginning to. That's why I'm excited when I
Right.
when I listen to the RNC. There's some things that give me hope, and other things that I'm like, ooh, they really make me feel bad. Like one is like, can we get some cheers for Israel? And everyone's like, yeah. And I'm like, oh god, this is pretty
Right.
gross.
Yeah. Yeah. Unfortunately, that one's okay. I think in general, like these foreign policy attitudes that people have, are again they're a mile wide and inch deep. There's really not much to them. And then when you have a responsible leader like on the Republican side, somebody like Walter Jones in North Carolina, or
Rand Paul.
well, Rand Paul, or even
Thomas
more
Massey.
so his father, Ron Paul, right? When they can go to the most conservative districts, or in the country, and win, telling them that all this stuff is nonsense, and people listen and say, hey, I know this guy is good, I believe him, and they don't really care about it. It's not something that they believe in deeply. It's just something they hear on TV, and they can, so their opinions about these other countries are just kind of are shaped, but not at a deep level. I think the one problem, again, the exception to that is Israel, for the reasons that we've talked about. Christian Zionism and Jewish Zionism are real things, and they're very powerful forces in this country. And so that's going to be a hard one to overcome. But the other ones could be overcome, I think, pretty quickly if we had a responsible leadership.
Yeah, well, the America First movement is what gives me hope, because then I'll hear some talks, that there'll be some cheers for Israel or whatever, and then I'll hear some quotes about how we need to stop these foreign wars and we need to focus on our problems at home. We need to quit trying to, spread ourselves too thin and make enemies around the world. I'm like, yes, thank you. Let's stick to this. I can get behind this. Let's just stick with staying at home.
Right.
Right.
So there is some incoherence, obviously there. It's this intellectual incoherence. But yeah, the fact that this, kind of America First idea resonates with people, I think that's real, and it could be the way out of of Zionism somewhere down the road.
Right. That's what I'm hoping, is that people let's make this the core of whatever.
Right. I think it's
whatever movement that we're experiencing right now. Because there is
I think Zionism is too powerful a force, especially like on the right in this country, to attack it directly. I'll attack it directly, or other people will, but I think it's just like, if you're at the level of, if you're a senator or a presidential candidate, you just can't take it on. But you can push an America First argument, and I think people will listen to that. And it's not saying, hey, I'm not anti-Israel, whatever. Yeah, it's the greatest country on earth, or whatever. But America's first. This is our country, right? And we just can't get involved, and we just got to stop. We've got problems here. We can't keep on sending billions of dollars over there, and people respond to that.
It makes sense. It's just logical.
Right.
Everybody knows that things aren't going so well right now, so maybe we should focus on our problems here. People can see, the homelessness issues in their cities, fentanyl coming across the borders, the price of their Big Mac has gone up like double in the past 5 years, and it's clear that people know that there's a problem, and it just resonates when we say, hey, let's stop sending billions of dollars overseas and invest it here in America. So yeah, maybe we will see some changes. I feel like there is some type of new movement happening, and it was also interesting listening to some of these speeches at the RNC, it almost sounded like, the progressives of the 60s and 70s. A lot of these were talking about, like, it doesn't matter the color of your skin or where you're from or what you do. We're based it on you work hard, the American dream. You can be whatever you want to be. Because it's a reach. They're playing on the rejection of identity politics, which is good. It's true. Identity politics is just racism, and is getting rid of merit and focusing on whatever equity goal they have in mind. And we're seeing it play out throughout everywhere, and everybody sees that it's a failure. We're seeing it just like we're just talking about the Secret Service. We got the head of Secret Service is Frito-Lay's woman. That is her main goal. One of her main goals she's stated is to make sure that 30% of Secret Service members are female. And it's like,
right.
Well, why? Secret Service members need to run alongside the car. They need to be tall to be able to shield and cover.
Well, you saw that actually right there. I mean, there was that woman, nobody's denigrating her bravery or anything. Clearly, she was very brave and she reacted correctly. But she was short. I'm sorry.
Right.
She was just too short. She couldn't shield
his head.
him.
Yeah, she's got to jump up and down.
It's like if that guy, if somebody was going to take another shot, it was going to be over her head because she could not shield him. Right?
No,
it was just silly to have somebody assign her to that detail.
Right.
I mean, there are probably other things that she could do, but just that was not. It made no sense to have her there. You needed big, tall guys, big, beefy guys. That's who you have to have around the.
Right.
The
I mean, it's just
person.
kind of it's one of those things that I think has really expedited the incompetency and failure of all of our institutions. Is this push on DEI? I talked to my buddy that's in the National Guard as well. He was just saying, like, the standards now in the military are just abysmal. Like, they had these, I forget, these different benchmarks. And basically they just got rid of them because the women couldn't reach them. So they just said, okay, well, we're just going to drop it all down. So now it's just, and people can see it. And it just starts to create this rot inside all of these institutions. It's like, okay, well, good job. Now, there were already maybe issues with incompetence, and now it's just
right.
It's a joke. Everybody knows it, and you're making the whole government just this one big joke, so you can get that perfect, pamphlet picture of diversity, to show like, look, we did it. That doesn't represent reality at all. And at the end of the day, people just want somebody that is good at doing their job. And America is supposed to be a country where if you work hard and you're the best at what you're doing, then you will be rewarded for it. It shouldn't be that, oh, well, I'm belong to this class and I'm this combination of intersectional, whatever it is, and now I'm the best because I'm, Latino and black and gay and I'm gender fluid or whatever it is, You get the idea. I won't go too far.
We know. We all know. Right?
We all know. Everybody knows. It's just It's just gotten ridiculous. Okay, I'll pull it back before I get on a rant too much. But something that I've been thinking about as well, and I want your thoughts about it, is do you think that the fact that Trump really very narrowly missed death? I think I sent you that video of where you can see his head motion literally as it's going, and you can see the path where the bullet would have gone through his skull if he didn't turn. We're talking about milliseconds as he turned, So people say that the shooter was incompetent. The shooter would have killed him. It just happened.
Right.
It's really miraculous that Trump's not dead. So I think
just so you actually get conspiracy theories on the other side of this, where people saying this was just like scripted. It couldn't actually be, it'd be so, obviously they. I'm sorry, but explain to me how you could script this. I'm just you're gonna hit the president's ear, right?
Pretty risky shot, right? So but I think it's taking the world and the nation a little time to kind of realize and absorb what happened. We're just constantly being bombarded with this sort of terror and news porn with just constantly like, everything's on fire, and so I think it took a little while maybe for people to kind of digest what happened. I think it's going to take some time for Trump to digest how close he came to dying, and I think something like that will change a person, and I hope it changes somebody for the better. Like nobody very, very, very few people have such a near life experience. But a lot of us
Near
have
death,
had
yeah.
no, sorry, yeah, sorry, near death experiences. But a lot of us have had experiences in our life that changed the course of our life and been like, man, whoa, that was I shouldn't have done that. I need to stop drinking because I crashed my car. I could have killed somebody. I could have,
Yeah, right.
these types of incidents.
Right.
This is something that is just incredibly real, and it's very very public, and something that he has to be kind of reflecting on his life, and hopefully maybe this is too hopeful, maybe kind of think that maybe understand the sanctity of life, and maybe that that life is sacred, and we and us throwing these wars across the world, these are people too that have mothers and fathers and sons and daughters and brothers and sisters that we're killing in these pointless wars. And hopefully maybe he will have some kind of realization that, like, maybe he could be kind of more of a peace president. I hope so. I don't know, maybe that's too much to hope for. Do you think there's anything there that you think that this near-death experience could potentially have changed things for the better, or maybe made him like, I don't give a shit about anything.
Yeah, well, I can't say that can't happen. It certainly it certainly is possible, like you say. That could be a life-changing experience. But I'll be the cynic and say nothing. I expect nothing will change.
Or
and
maybe it'll make him the opposite, and he's just like,
yeah,
you know what,
well, that's
I really
not impossible
am God.
either.
He's
Right.
like, I'm invincible. I'm the man. He's just been everything they throw at me. I just get stronger and
Makes me
stronger.
stronger, right?
So keep on trying to kill me.
I still think, there's. It's certainly not impossible. When it comes to the Ukraine war in particular, there's. I wouldn't be too hopeful. I don't think anything significantly is going to change.
Don't really?
Yeah, I'm only going to change my assessment on that if he chooses the right people. Both in the I'm talking about both the Pentagon and the State Department. And if there is some, if he chooses people that are really in line with his, let's say, certain statements that he's made about winding things down in Ukraine, if they're in line with that approach, then I'll believe it. I will. And until then, I'm just not going to. Now, I know that
I don't. I
VP
think
pick,
right.
Yeah, no, he's different. But the thing is, he's the VP. I mean, the fact is, I am impressed. He has said the right things in the past. He had that op-ed piece. He showed a real understanding of what was going on there. And again, that means something. I mean, I think Trump often has the right instincts, but he's just intellectually too lazy to actually be able to put together a real coherent argument. And I think that's one reason why he gets, fails to implement his policies, because he's surrounded by these guys who know how to manipulate him, and he doesn't have enough of a firm grasp, of the facts to really to tell him no. But clearly, his VP pick, J.D. Vance, does. He knows what's going on, and not only. Well, okay. Sometimes you find somebody who has an independent position, and then that person is picked to be the VP candidate, and then he changes overnight. He's just okay. He changes everything, and just kind of just to bring himself in line with establishment policy. He just very careful about what he says. But he went ahead with this an op-ed piece in the Financial Times, where again he clearly strayed from orthodox opinion on
right.
Ukraine.
So you can tell us a little bit about that piece? He was saying something that Europe needs to prepare on how to, how they want to integrate Russia back into Europe, or something like this.
Right.
Now,
Yeah.
or how
Something
to deal with
right.
Russia. This
Right.
war is going to end, and you're going to have to realize that you're going to have to work with them in some way, in some capacity.
That's one thing. That's one very important point. The other thing is, he didn't go into it deeply, but he said, okay, the Europeans have this idea, or, we're hearing this claim that the Russians won't stop there and they'll be encouraged to go into other countries. He described that as a domino theory, which I think is a way of saying it's absurd, because the domino theory, I remember hearing that as a kid, actually, during the Vietnam War. It was used as a justification for the Vietnam War, and it just failed to be true. So I think he's basically saying the same thing. It's just like this fear of expansionist Russia is without foundation. So yeah, no, he's for real, I think, on Ukraine. But the thing is that he's just vice president, and actually the vice president has basically zero power. It's just he's only there to step in for the president should something happen
Yeah.
to him. And so but he may very well become president. I'm not predicting that Trump won't make it through his next term, his likely next term. But J.D.
After
Vance will
that.
be very strongly positioned to run for president in 4 years from now. And if he's president, I believe that, hopefully the world is still here, and World War III hasn't broken out. He's capable. He understands the need for it, and he's capable of taking the steps to wind down the Ukraine war.
I think that the Ukraine war will wind down quickly once Trump's in. I know that you're much more skeptical, but it's not the Trump that we saw the first time around, where he just loaded his cabinet with neocons. He seems to be aware of it now, and then we see people that he's talking to and he's around. For example, I mentioned David Sachs, who's an avid listener of the Duran. He had him on his All In podcast, and he talked about it, and he stated multiple times that he wants to end this war, and he need that Zelensky and Putin need to sit down and negotiate. So I think that's true. And then you have him talking to people like Viktor Orban. He chose J.D. Vance instead of choosing a standard establishment neocon. He chose somebody that's actually
true.
pretty
That's reason to be hopeful.
I think it's more
even
than
made
just
an
like
old cynic like me rather hopeful.
right.
But,
You're
but
saying it
still,
went from 5 to 10%. I think the
yeah,
likelihood
I would stay with that. 10% is actually pretty significant.
You're an old dummy because it's 50% at least.
All right.
I'm hopeful, but what scares me about Vance is I don't know if this is just rhetoric, because I listened to him talk at the RNC, this interview with Hannity. First of all, Hannity is Mr. Neocon 101. He loves Israel so much, and he just wants to blow up all the wars. He's always talking about our enemies and how we just got to destroy them. He maybe Vance was playing to the audience because he knew who was watching this, So I understand that, but he did say, like, look, we don't need to focus on Russia. We need to take care of ourselves, and we need to pull back and focus on China. That's what he said.
Right.
He said China's
unfortunately,
our
get a
main
lot
threat.
of people like that.
And then I was like, why? Well,
what's
what's this obsession with China? Why are we making China? If you're going to make somebody your enemy,
right?
How about choose go small? Start with Barbados or the Vatican City. Make those the enemies because they're small and we don't have to worry about it. Don't make China your enemy. Don't make anybody your enemy. But the idea of making China your enemy is just silly. So I hope that maybe when they get in power, they'll try to reframe that positioning instead of being adversarial militarily. Just be adversarial economically.
Right.
Be competitive. Let's try to outcompete. And maybe we'll see some kind of revival in manufacturing in the United States, because that was something that they were talking about addressing, is to unleash American energy, begin to export energy, to bring back manufacturing base. And if that's what they're talking about, then okay, great, I can get behind it. But this idea of trying to gear up, spin up the military machine. And the other thing that I would say that gives me a little bit of hope is that I'd like to see what kind of cabinet position Vivek Ramaswamy gets in. Vivek
if he gets one, that would be very meaningful.
He keeps on saying he's going to slash 75% of the government. He said he's just going to go through it and just gut entire departments, which is like, hallelujah! Please do that. Like,
I mean, he said a lot of things. So I mean, talking about Trump.
Okay. Well, I'm a little bit more hopeful. I
think that, again, like I say, I am a little more hopeful, but I'm still pessimistic. It's true. Yeah, he talks to these people. He's friends with people who tell him the right things. But that was also true the first term. I mean, he's a friend of Judge Napolitano, for God's sake. And Judge Napolitano gave him, all kinds of advice.
Right, told him to pardon Assange, and he said he would, and then he said, "Sorry, I can't do it."
Right. There's that, and he was close with Rand Paul. truth be told, I think sometimes Rand Paul got through to him. I think like on Syria to some extent. But yeah, the thing is, it really depends on who he puts around him. I mean, he does talk, he's open to talking to these people who have dissident ideas and sensible. And I think that's like his natural tendency.
Yeah, he wants everybody to like him.
Yeah,
So
but the thing, if he assigns the same old people, then it's all over. You know, we're going to get the same policies.
Just the fact that he picked Vance is a sign that he's not signing the same people.
But we're not quite sure.
Pence.
But we're not quite sure why he did that. You know, I think, you know, we're focused on Ukraine, but the electorate isn't. You know, it's more about Rust Belt politics and working class politics, and Vance has a lot of appeal. And, you know, I think he understands that he needs to win in places like Ohio and Pennsylvania, and Vance will help him do that. And, you know, to maybe get Wisconsin and Michigan like he did before. Yeah.
Well, we'll see. I'm.
Yeah.
I mean, I know I shouldn't get optimistic because I'm always disappointed.
Right. Yeah, that's the thing. Is my cynicism is born of a lot of. I've been through a lot of these election cycles, and there was always somebody who said something that was kind of exciting, and then it just that person got in power, you just never saw it change.
Well, the bar is so damn low right now that it's like you can't. It's how can we really do that much worse than what Biden's gotten us into so far, and it's just it's hard. I just don't understand where so many people on the left keep on touting all these victories of Biden. You know, it's like What are you talking about? I mean, it's just more gaslighting. I think it's just like things like, look, crime is low and inflation's dropping. It's like, what are you talking about? You know, it's just.
I guess maybe the rate of inflation is, maybe the rate of inflation,
down,
but the prices are still double. I mean, for the kind of things that I buy, they're double of what they were, you know, just a very few years ago, and it's making a difference in my life. I mean, I just.
Right.
It's hard to hang on to dollars now.
Yeah, I bought my boy the off-brand Hot Wheels car today.
Yeah, there you go. Just our special guest is.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, well, I think we're over an hour. I think we can stop it here.
Sure.
Yeah, there's one thing. We'll leave it for next time.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I think it's a good place to stop.
Okay. All right. Bye, Dad.
Bye.